here we are with Josh Fink, bass player extraordinaire, the best bass player on this planet.
Not true. Start up.
Thanks for doing this with us, Josh. You have a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom. You've been at Brook for a long, long time, and I love the way you approach this instrument. It's an instrument that I don't know a lot about, so I'm going to learn a lot today. So it's going to be really fun. Okay, so Josh came in today with basically 3 points. We're talking about how to play bass, obviously, in the context of a worship band, right? So worship bass is the topic, and he came up with these 3 points, which are awesome, and I think they bleed into pretty much every instrument as far as the philosophy and all that. So we're going to dive in. The first point that you have is intentionality, and again, that's something that I think about a lot as a guitar player, being intentional. And I assume that when it comes to bass, you're talking like intentionality, notes, time, groove, all that fun stuff. So maybe talk a little bit about what you mean by intentionality as it pertains to your bass, and any steps you take to get there, that
Sure.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. Great question.
Thank you.
Over the years of playing bass, just kind of more and more realize what a language music is.
Yeah.
And it really relates to just the way I speak with my voice.
Yeah.
And how I use my voice. I think when I was a kid too, and I first started out playing, I really thought that the players who could like fit the most notes into a measure could just shred were the best musicians.
Just like guitar players.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. And not to take away from that genre or style, because it is, some of those players are absolutely incredible. But the older I got and more mature I got in playing bass, I think I realized it's not necessarily, same with language and communicating, it's not necessarily who can fit the most words into a sentence or who can speak the quickest. Oftentimes with communicating, it's definitely about listening. Listening is huge in terms of communicating. It's, like I said, not about how many words you use. Oftentimes it's about using like one word to convey the most meaning and picking the right time to say it. People who've communicated things to me with a lot of impact oftentimes don't have to say a whole lot. They can say just the right word at the right time.
Yeah.
And it can be so impactful. And in the same way with bass is nice because I'm playing oftentimes, most of the time, one note at a time.
Yeah.
And I can really be intentional about when I choose to use that word or that note, and try to make the most impact with the words or the notes that I'm saying. Yeah, to me, the older I get and the more mature I get in playing music, and the people I listen to, it's the people that I really admire are the ones who oftentimes just use one little note and it's like, oh,
Yep.
that was amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of what separates, from my experience, it's what separates the pros from the beginners or whatever, is the person that tries to prove themselves playing a bunch of notes, but then you got the guy who's been doing it forever. It's like simple, but like you get that point across. It's like, oh, you get it.
Right.
And especially in the bass world, like my favorite bass players, you're in that camp where it's just like, what you're doing feels so right. So are there any like specific exercises, things like that you want to dive into that you prep or you practice to get to that intentionality?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's not often how fast we can play or how many notes we can fit into a measure. And oftentimes in preparation and being able to have a deeper pocket, if you will, or a deeper feel or groove, it's really nice to practice at slow tempos.
Yeah.
I've heard of people, setting click tracks at like 40 beats per measure.
Wow.
And then practicing all the notes on the neck. Like obviously we want to know all the notes we have up and down the neck.
Yep.
In any key. But to be able to practice slow and really define like where you're at in time, I think is really key. And then what's nice to do is if you're setting a click track really slow is to subdivide, maybe play all your scales on the ands in between. One thing that's different about the bass than say like drums is drums, you'll hit a note and it's just gonna ring out. A drummer, can hit it and like muffle it and stop their note, or hit a crash and choke it.
Sure.
But most of the time, drummers like hit a note and it rings out. And bass players also have to start and stop their note. So being really mindful of not only when we start our note and when that transient begins, but then like watching it as it fades out. There's a lot we can do to control like we can really start and stop our note. In practicing, practice slow, practice where you're hitting the notes, whether it's on the E's, the ands, the ahs, in between the notes.
Yeah.
Being mindful of.
Let's play some examples of you. We'll put a click on and it'll be slow, and you can kind of give us an example of what you do there.
Sure. So the thing about practicing slow with the click would be to internalize that quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we subdivide 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and.
Wow. Simply mind-blowing. Incredible. Yeah, what else do you have to say? Anything else about that or time?
Time is obviously really important as a musician in general, not just a bass player. And so coming in prepared with, having a really good internal clock is really important. Like we talked about, practicing at a slow tempo helps improve that internal clock. But one big lesson that I learned early on was, you think of notes as subdivisions and you've got to measure. And if you were to take quarter notes, you've got 4 notes and they're equally divided 25% apart or whatever.
Right.
And then there's such a thing as like perfect. Like I'm gonna play perfect, like right dead center in the middle of the note. That's not really even possible. So like let's get perfection out the window.
Right.
We do want to be really intentional though. And I think the best players are oftentimes, for me, are the ones who can conscientiously choose where they're playing on that note. And so instead of thinking of notes as like perfect little stabs in time of like, on a click track, thinking of notes as like orbs, where there's a front of the note, a middle of the note, a back of the note, and then there's so much leeway in between there,
an orb.
Like an orb. I don't know, I've often heard 10 milliseconds behind for a bass player is like this sweet spot. Mike actually may have talked about that as sort of like this like gold magic spot. For me, I really enjoy playing with drummers who lock it like right on, and they're locking in, because then it gives the bass player that ability
that
to
wiggle room.
Yeah. And to pull on it and create a little bit of tension and feel. That's some of the coolest stuff to me is in music, when there is this tension of like it's making you feel something, and to the average listener they don't really know why they feel relaxed, or they don't know why they're infused with some energy. And so for me, it's cool when a drummer establishes like he or she is playing on a click, and it's dead on. They're really aiming for the center, and then the bass player, maybe on the intro they're a little ahead. On the verse they can fall back, maybe right in the middle. Maybe on a bridge they fall like way behind. But it's about being consistent and intentional. If we're unintentionally all over the map, that's just not going to feel good.
Right.
So to me, again, it's about practicing slow, so that we know where we're at, and so we're able to practice playing ahead, playing on, and then a lot of that's just being able to record and look at those transients in terms of the click and the measure. So
that's crazy intentionality.
People talk about groove and feel, and I think that's to me what it is like being able to push and pull.
That's intentionality, and we could keep talking about that point for days, but that's a really great place to start.